do have several visitors here tonight. So I would like to tell you what CAPCA stands for. We're the Chesapeake Area Professional Captains Association. Very good. So what we have tonight is a really, really good program, in my opinion, what offshore racing can teach us. And we have three panelists who have been ocean racers. We have Captain Jayne Durden, we have Captain Dave Tabor, and we have Captain Lynn McClaskey. Yay! Now, I'm very humbled by the effort that Cheryl Duvall, who's the moderator, put this program together. She's been putting together such terrific programs for the members and the public.
With a really great program committee.
With a really great program committee.
Yes.
So today is September 23rd, and we were supposed to start at 6:45, but we're a little behind, but let's have the next slide, please. All right. So this is pretty much our agenda. We're already behind, but and we're going to have a raffle drawing. So based on this, we only have 12 minutes, and we've already lost 5.
We're good.
But we're going to be doing the panel presentation from 7 to 7:50, and then we're going to have questions. We have a microphone right here. So what we want to do when people have questions from the audience in the room is to come to the mic so we can record the question. And then we have people on Zoom as well, and we're probably going to be able to take questions from them.
Yes, they're going to enter them in the chat.
And they'll enter those in the chat box. And then we'll wrap up, and then we have a door prize at the end of the program.
Actually, we now have 2 door prizes.
That's right, we now have 2 door prizes, and Cheryl will point those out and tell you what they are. Next slide, please. So this is our board and our directors who are basically in charge of the program. I'm Tony Tomasello. I was elected president this year. Our vice president is Hans Hoffman. Hans, raise your hand, stand up or do something. This is Hans. David Jones. Is David here? I don't think David's here.
No.
No. And then we have our past president, Vicky Saporta. Vicky, okay, thank you. And Priscilla, is Priscilla here?
She's doing the Zoom.
She's doing the Zoom. Well, Priscilla,
Zoom.
show us your face. We can't see you, Priscilla. But thank you very much. And then Carl Bart is the treasurer, and he's standing at the door taking everybody's money. And then we have a board of directors. We have Mike Clark, who's our communication director. We have our continuing education director, Alan Karpus. I know that Alan is not here, but we do have continuing education programs for captains to renew their license, get their first aid, CPR renewal, and some other program, continuing education classes coming up. The job programs, I'm amazed at how well the board posts job opportunities. I think it's one of the tremendous assets for our captains to be able to go on there and look at what's available and sign up to do that job. We have membership director, Phil Gaithier. We now have 327 active members. Yep. Cheryl Duvall, obviously we've introduced her, and then Dave Sire. Is Dave here?
No.
Dave's not here, but Dave, I can't say how much I appreciate Dave's work as our webmaster. I don't know, I'm old, right? I don't know anything about how to work a web or how to work a website, but Dave has been doing a tremendous job keeping the web up to date, available. And if you go to our website, there are so many options that you can study what we do, look at our programs, look at what's coming up, look at our calendar. And if you're a member, you can see other members and get their contact information. But the website's available to the public, and they have access to all of the program material, except they don't see members. So there's a difference between the public access and our professional captains access relative to the website. Next slide, please. Now here are 27 new members that we brought in since April. So right up to date now, I don't know if we can have the people's names that are on here who are in the room. I don't know if I'm going to read all 27 names, but if you're in the room, please stand up if you're on this list. What is your name, sir? You're Mike. When were you? Third one
Mike
down in the
Dillon.
middle.
Yeah.
Mike Dillon. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Very good. Welcome. Welcome.
And also, we might have some online.
And there are maybe
Are there
some
any online, Priscilla?
Can we get those online?
It takes me a while to go through the list and compare.
Can they take themselves off of, can they take themselves off of mute and say, yeah, I'm here?
Yeah, sure, just unmute them. Unmute yourself.
Well, we might not be able to hear from all of them. I'm going to try to keep us on our agenda schedule.
Go ahead.
But I'm very impressed that we've got 27 new members and that we're now above 300 in our full membership. Next slide. So we have two shows coming up that we are participating in. The Powerboat Show, both of these are going to be at the City Dock. The Powerboat Show is coming up October 3 through 6, and the Sailboat Show is coming up October 10 through 14. And we do need volunteers. There's opportunities for members to staff the booth at the boat shows. And we have some open spaces, and we do need volunteers to put their body in that booth so that we can meet people. I'm going to be presenting at the Powerboat Show about the advantages of becoming a CAPCA member. And one of the things I'm going to say is, come to our booth. I'm hoping that those who are in attendance to the presentation will walk to the booth and learn about how to become a member, and sometimes how to even become a captain. We have a lot of boaters, as you well know, who do not have captain's licenses. And when they become captains, they are available for membership in the Professional Captains Association. Sir.
If Michael Gross mentioning that the time commitment for volunteers to start the booth is half a day.
Half a day. Half a day. Okay, very good. Next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Cheryl because we've got all this information about upcoming programs.
And I have my own mic, so I don't need that one. Okay. On your tables is a yellow sheet that has these upcoming programs on it. So if you need a little reminder, they're right there. Otherwise, you can take a picture with your camera if you want. And all of this is on our website. So next month, we'll be back here at the Elks. And our speaker is Captain Bob Schwartz, who is also a CAPCA member. And it's about working together to keep water safe and what they've been doing at the Occoquan River. Very exciting program. And we also will have Michael Dodd. Mike, wave your hand. He will be here to promote one of his books and sell them. So if any of you are interested, it is also one of the 2 door prizes that we're going to give out tonight. So anyway, he will be here at a table to, represent his book and suggest it. So then we have a tour. This is still being confirmed as of this morning. I had not yet heard confirmation from the U.S. Coast Guard, but there is a tour of the command center in Baltimore. Some of you might remember we did this in April. They can only take 20 of our members. This is a member-only event, so no guests allowed, not even if it's a +1 or anything, it's members only. And we're limiting it to people who have not previously toured. So I toured before, so I would not be eligible to tour this time. And our CAPCA website will be updated, we think tomorrow, but if the U.S. Coast Guard has not positively confirmed it, we might have to wait a little bit. So just keep checking the website for that. It is a great tour, I can tell you that, because I was there in April when we did it. We have 3 upcoming classes that you can see there: Captain's License Renewal, And this is a great class. It's just one day and it's half the price of some of our local competitors give. So I highly recommend that. Both my husband and I took that in the last couple of years and it was excellent. On Saturday, that's on October 19th. On Saturday, November 2nd, you can see we have CPR and AED and first aid for boaters. So if you just take a American Red Cross for your CPR, it's fine, but this one is targeted specifically for boaters. And we have some different challenges on a boat than a normal person might have doing CPR. So it is really excellent. Again, I've taken this, I took it 2 years ago. It's really an excellent course. And then leadership for captains, it requires a minimum of 12 people. I think there might be 6 or 7 signed up. So trying to promote that for Saturday, November 16th. And then the fall business meeting, this is CAPCA members only, and this is where we do our elections, which leads me to your next handout. On your tables, there is a white sheet that talks about elections, and you can nominate yourself or you can nominate other people with their permission, please. And we need that by about a month from now, October 28th. So please, we have a couple open positions, as you can see there, Secretary, Director of Continuing Ed, and 3 members at large, which are new. So we're looking for more members to get involved on our board. And lastly, if I can draw your attention to the pink sheet, we have enough for every single person in this room for this one and the blue sheet. The pink sheet is to give us your feedback about tonight and also any ideas for upcoming topics or speakers or tours that you might be interested in. If you know somebody, please sign it and give us your email so we can reach out to you and get information for you from you for that. And then the blue sheet is about tonight's program. And as our speakers get started, we're in just a few minutes. If you think of any questions, we're going to ask you to note that, just this is note paper for you and there are pens there, so you can just make a note so you don't forget your question, because we'll be asking their questions later at the end of the program, at the end of their presentation after I've asked them a few. So, any questions about upcoming programs? All right, now's the time for our 50-50 raffle. Where is Greg? Come on up. How are we doing there? And you need to come this way to the... Can you go to this one? Yeah, go right here and just use this. Yes. Oh, yes, ask them to draw. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Never done this before. Reach in there and pick a one. So the winner,
Okay.
just to do the 50-50.
At the mic, at the mic, at the mic, at the mic. I know, but they need to hear online, even though they're not.
Oh, that's right,
participating.
okay.
Yes.
So if everybody who bought a ticket online, pick them out. 33654, we good so far? 006. See that?
All right, so it's 50-50, right? All right, so I'll let you figure it out while you're over there so we can keep going. Thank you. All right. And next slide. Awesome. Okay. We'll bring the lights back up after we have the slides presented. I'm waiting for the I didn't want to interrupt anything. Are you good? I don't think Carol wants to miss her husband being introduced. Are we good? All right. All right, paid for dinner. There you go. Awesome. Thank you, Greg. And I want to especially thank Greg Papps, because apparently I just joined CAPCA 2.5 years ago during the pandemic. So I didn't know what our meetings were like before the pandemic. And apparently we did this before the pandemic, and a lot of people got together and they ate down the hall and then they came in here and had their meeting. So Greg, somebody remembered that Greg did this, and I reached out to him and he said, I love doing that, I'll come back and do it. So thank you very much, Greg, really appreciate it. All right, so it is my honor to introduce the three panelists. On our website, their bios are posted, so everybody online right now and anybody else that wants to go see can see their bios posted. We also have a summary on 1 or 2 pages, I think it's 1 page per table. So let me just give you some personal information here as to how I know some of them. So Captain Jayne Durden, on your left, I first learned about Jayne through her helm, which is photographer Kristen McClaskey's portrait celebration of 50 women making their way on the water. I purchased the book, and this is not an inexpensive book, I will tell you. I purchased the book and read every single bio that is in there, and Hillary Howes is in there, who's handling our AV. Vicki Supporta is in there, who's over here. Julianne is in there. Lynn and Jayne. Did I miss anybody? I'm in there. And you're in there for the painting. That's right. And Priscilla, who is our host tonight, is in there for, she'll have to tell me what it is. It's at the end, it's a little essay, I think at the end of the book, right? And I don't know if anybody else online is also featured in her helm. So anyway, great book, great website. You can go and look at the website and see their bios, just awesome. So I purchased this book and enjoyed learning about these amazing women. Now, Jayne cruises and races on her Beneteau 331 Happy Place, among other boats. She's also a sail maker for Almond Sails and does trademark and brand protection on the work on the side. It's like, wow, okay. When I heard that Jayne had recently completed the Annapolis to Bermuda race, often called the A to B race, I believe, we invited her to join this evening's panel. So you'll hear more about her sailing story in a moment, but welcome, Jayne. Captain Dave Tabor. I first learned of Dave through his wife, Carol, who is with us tonight. Carol and I, and is in her helm too. Carol and I met because we are both watercolor artists. She's a much better artist than I am. I do aspire. And then we discovered we were both sailors. So through Carol, I learned about Dave's very, very adventuresome sailing life, which includes many offshore races with teams as a duo and also a few solos. They also race together on summer evenings and Poplar Bay races up and down the Chesapeake and other places. I met Dave shortly after they had both returned from 10 or so months sailing oysters from New Zealand to Australia to Indonesia and on to South Africa. All I could say at that point was, wow. So you'll hear more from Dave in a moment. So welcome, Dave. And then Lynn, last but not least. I met Lynn shortly after I'd moved to Annapolis about 7 years ago, and I naively accepted an invitation from a mutual friend of ours, Bob Fox, to join him on a race night in Annapolis. I had no idea what I was in for. I'm a cruiser, I am not a racer. And especially after that night, I decided I did not want to be a racer. Thankfully, the rest of the crew, which included Lynn, were very, very capable racers, and I was truly a deer in the headlights. I reconnected with Lynn when she was featured in her helm, like Jayne, and Lynn had just joined CAPCA at the invitation of Vicki, our past president, and another her helm captain. Later, I interviewed Lynn for CAPCA's Meet the Captain column, and if any of you want to be in there, shameless plug, please talk to me because I'm always looking for people. I've also featured Dave Tabor in our Meet the Captain column, which appears in our monthly newsletter. So I got to hear more of Lynn's sailing stories, which you're about to learn, and her daughter Katie is here tonight. Hi, Katie, and is also a crew member. So thank you, Lynn and Katie. So we are all in for a great treat this evening. These are three very accomplished captains. with very much to offer all of us. So my challenge as moderator will be cutting them off at times because they have so much to share, but let's get to it. So each panelist will now introduce themselves with a few slides and stories, and then I'll start asking some questions before I open up to all of you and to those who are online. Okay.
Thanks, Cheryl, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm really excited to be here. Hillary, are you my button pusher? All right, I'll give you the look. So I'm Captain Jayne Durden. As you can tell from the accent, born in Australia, but I've lived in the States since 2002. And so I thought I'd give you a little bit of background about my sailing. It's a bit of a visual journey. So I started sailing this illustrious vessel, which is called a mirror. It's a kit boat that were made with instructions in the newspaper in the 1950s. And if you put it all together, you wrote off to the newspaper and they told you where you could go and get the sails. I inherited this boat, her name was Ahab, from my aunt, and that thing got me through my teenage years. I'm probably 13 there, that was good times. That's my dad. So I learned to sail and learned to prepare to sail with my father. And Hillary, next one. As the years went on, we just went on bigger and bigger boats. So this is us, I think in the Whitsundays, or maybe up just north of Sydney in what's called Pittwater. But we basically took a month each year, got a boat from somewhere. I'm now realizing that that was a bit of a feat that my father did, and sailed there. He and I near shore and then offshore raced as well in the most ridiculously inappropriate boats to race, including a cement-built ketch. But we got there, it was all right. And so the boats got bigger and bigger until this has got to be just before COVID. I think this is 2019. This is my dad in the Chesapeake on Herring Bay with me talking to my dad and finally teaching him how to handle my little San Juan 23, which I had at that time. So I did a lot of dinghy sailing, a lot of inshore and offshore, and then a lot of chartering. But all of these times, until probably that moment, my dad was in charge. He was the one that prepared. Right, Katie? Your mom's in charge? Until very early in 2020, which surprisingly I didn't meet Carol and Dave. I bought my Beneteau 331 down in Deltaville, and it really turned into my life. She was called Happy Place, and if you remember the dark days of early 2020 when Maryland had a
Moratorium.
boating ban, that was when I bought my boat. But she turned into a place of dark and stormies, and then sailing and racing in Herring Bay, and she's now also turned into my business. So I run what's called Sailing Happy Place from my boat and from Herring Bay and beyond. I work mostly with women sailors, mostly with women owners who have bought boats, quite often in COVID times, and get their boat and say, oh no, what now? So I work coaching new owners, coaching wives where they've come into the boat as well, delivering, doing sea trials. I run a women's sailing program, and I'm also the Commodore of Harrington Harbour Sailing Association. And I make some sails. Well, I fit some sails on the side. Hillary, for the deliveries, and I know you guys have talked about deliveries before and preparing for offshore. Like most captains, I do plenty of them. I grab my nearest and dearest, they're sitting on the table over here, and I say, come in a boat that we don't really know much about, but don't worry about it. We're going to take it down to Florida. And if you're lucky, you get to do a delivery like this Beneteau 49 that we delivered from Annapolis down to Hilton Head. Full cockpit enclosure, Starlink had just been installed, 3 cooked meals a day. It was wonderful. So our deliveries sometimes suck. Generally, the boats you get to pick are pretty nice, and you are sailing off down the coast with full enclosures. That's not what we're talking about tonight. I also do a lot of offshore or nearshore racing, and as you're going to hear tonight, it's quite a different scene. Most recently, I raced a J boat, J99, from Annapolis to Bermuda, and I thought you should sort of see what this looks like very quickly. So here's me at the start. There's our class flag and our flag looking great, and here's us with our picture taken by Will Keyworth at the start. Now, the J99, as you see, is an open transom, 33-foot boat, and I raced with 5 young men. If I looked like that by day 4, I want you to imagine what they looked like and what they smelled like. We also very quickly discovered that seawater had gotten into the solenoid for the gas, which meant that our stove didn't work. Oof. From Cape Charles. Wow. So we crossed the Atlantic to Bermuda with no hot food. We also burst a water tank. You're going to hear all about this, but I want you to imagine how glorious that is. Chili sitting in a bag, sitting on the engine. And at that point, the engine worked too. So we could heat up the chili and we were doing okay. The next slide shows you actually what it feels like. Dave, this is us coming through the cut in St. George's. The most amazing part about racing when you're racing across the ocean is you get to go to a place like Bermuda on the other side. So this is us in St. George's enjoying the spoils of making it there.
Pretty soon you get to sail out of it.
Well, that was actually us sailing out of it because the engine had broken.
So yes, I'm Dave Tabor. Wow, to start. I learned to sail 50 years ago this year in Maine. My mother took me up there sailing on the Lightning. And I'd always been hooked on the water and boats, and I think that did me in right then and there. Went off to college. I did not race for the college, but I sailed boats at Old Dominion. Graduated in not a very great time to graduate and look for a job, so I was lucky to find a job working in a boatyard down in Matthews County and spent a year doing that, and bought my first boat, which was a Hampton One design. It's a indigenous boat to Hampton, Newport News area, very popular, and then bought a laser. That's me sailing there originally with the laser, actually just recently. This picture here is me at the helm of a boat called Gabrielle that some of you may know. It was a J29 that Bob Diamond had. This is about 15 years ago, sailing up the bay after doing an Oxford race. And I guess about the mid-90s, I found the internet and was able to get hooked up with people looking for crew. And that was kind of important because at the time I was living in Loudoun County. I was working shift work, weekends and Saturdays and Sundays and night shift and all that. So coming over to Annapolis to do Friday night races or anything wasn't happening. But I did get the opportunity to do some offshore sailing. And after 2 or 3 trips, all of a sudden I had a resume and people started saying, hey, you come do a delivery for me? This is me on a Swan 48 doing Lauderdale to St. Martin in February, and we still refer to that as the delivery from hell. That same boat I had done probably 5 trips on over about a 5-year period, including a Chicago Mac race. And then the next slide is the same year, my first Newport Bermuda race, and that's me at the helm in the Gulf Stream. We were the only boat that had a chute up that we could see, and it was blowing 30, 32 gusts higher, and you can tell it looked a little sporty. So by then I had done Annapolis, Bermuda, Newport, Bermuda, and then I had a break of a couple of years where I wasn't doing a lot of sailing just due to family stuff. And then I guess about 2008 or so, I kind of got reconnected with the racing scene and started doing Annapolis, Newport, Newport, Bermuda, etc. In 2017, I retired. kicked out the door, and just happened to have friends that said, hey, come to New Zealand and sail with us. And by the way, this guy needs a crew. So my wife and I went to New Zealand, and we ended up crewing in the Oyster World Rally. Went from New Zealand to Vanuatu, down to Australia, over to Indonesia, jumped ship, got on another boat, sailed across the Indian Ocean, and then up in Cape Town, and then came back here. All the while, back in 2011, I had bought a 36-foot Canadian sailcraft Merlin, CS36M, had been racing that, doing Wednesday night races, and finally did the what I originally bought the boat for, and that was in 2015, again in 17, and again last year in 23. I did a race called the Bermuda 1-2, and that's Newport to Bermuda, single-handed, and then Bermuda back to Newport, double-handed. This picture here is from last June. One of my competitors took a picture of me going past, and I took a picture of him. Wind was a little after the beam, blowing in the 20s. I'm double reefed, and then the jib is partially rolled up. So that's kind of my background. I've done 6 Newport Bermudas, a couple Annapolis Bermudas, 3 Bermuda 1-2s, and a couple other deliveries. So I've got a pretty extensive offshore racing background, and that's pretty much where I am now. That boat is for sale. It's on the hard now. Labor Day weekend was its final regatta. It's on the hard, and my wife and I have a J42 that we're just getting dialed in and getting used to sailing. So hopefully you'll see that next year. Pardon? Oh yes, we did win that regatta. So.
Thank you, Dave.
That's right. Jayne and I met. I was up at Oak Harbor working on that boat, and she was there getting ready to do a delivery, and we got to talking. So that's how we met.
Awesome.
And Lynn and I have known each other for probably a dozen years or so.
They all know each other, which is why
Yes,
keeping
we do.
this on time is
So-
going to be tough. All right.
Anyway, so
Thank you, Dave.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn McClaskey. I don't have any early pictures of my early sailing career because I was invented before cameras, but I came up through my club's junior program, and yes, there is sailing in Oklahoma, so Windy Crest Sailing Club in Prue, Oklahoma, on Lake Keystone, Oklahoma. So when I got through college and whatnot, moved to the area and started racing here locally out of Galesville, and just started to get my offshore chops started going. There was a lot for me to learn. The difference between Oklahoma and Atlantic Ocean is big. So I started, I bought a little boat and started racing the little boat. It didn't turn out that well. And then I had a little person, actually 2 little people, that kind of scuttled my offshore racing career for 12 years or so. So fortunately, when she was 12, when my youngest was 12, I got back into it in a big way and racing to Bermuda. So my first race to Bermuda, really, if you can back up a little bit, Hillary. Back. Yeah, that's the little one who grew up to be a great sailor. And that was my little CNC. This is my first race to Bermuda, and I had no idea what I was getting into, but this is the moment that I was hooked on ocean racing for sure. I had no idea how far from Bermuda we were, how long it was going to take. It didn't care. The biggest issue was I was on my last clean shirt, so we had to be getting close. So that hooked me, and then this is me doing sea trials on my J110 up in Maine. I bought it up in Maine. Again, I had no idea what I was getting into, but I figured if the guy I crewed for could do it, so could I. How hard can it be? So I bought a boat, and I put it together. This is Cimarron, my J110. And this is us leaving on the last Newport Bermuda race. And our crew uniforms all have the number 9 on it. We were 12 females that did the delivery from Annapolis to Newport, did the race from Newport to Bermuda, and then did the delivery home from Bermuda back to Annapolis. So the 9 represents a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote, "When will there be enough Supreme Court justices that are women?" And she replied, "When there are 9. So I'm pretty big on promoting women in sailing, as is Jayne. So we want to give those opportunities to women, and that was a great way to transition from some of my crew have gone off to join other boats or buy ocean racing boats of their own and have their own campaign now. So that was a big shift for me to go to all-female crew. And this is part of our training for the Newport race. This is the St. Michael's race earlier this year. So most of my offshore experience has been either deliveries. I've gone from Belize to Bar Harbor and over to Bermuda. So, oh, actually now I can add Halifax. I can add Halifax. So that's kind of my offshore story right there.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, so those are their introductions, and then we're going to bring the lights up now so that we can just sort of dive in with some questions. And so, Lynn, I'm going to send this first one to you. Walk us through your process of getting ready for an offshore trip or race and the differences with when you're delivering a boat, like, you know, the dichotomy between the racing and the delivery.
All right, well, if any of you in the room are sailors, you've probably heard the question, when is it time to reef? And the answer is always, if you're thinking about it, it's time to do it. So if you're thinking about doing an offshore race, it's time to get started preparing. You can't start too early. Annapolis Newport will be in the spring, in June next year, 2025. And a lot of people are already preparing, and I would say, you know, if this is your first time prepping a boat to go offshore in a race like this, it's time to start now. This is kind of you're behind a little bit. So there's a lot of long lead time items, and if you've never started undertaking this kind of thing before, the best place to start is to look at the notice of race and see what all is required. And for offshore races, there's usually a safety inspection, and they will tell you right up front what items they're going to be looking for. There's a lot of safety equipment that's required to do these races. So you have to start by looking at some of those long lead time things. Is your rig in good shape? The bottom of the boat, are you going to order new sails? Who's going to crew for you? If it's a Bermuda race and you haven't booked lodgings by November, you're in trouble. So those are all things to start thinking about the winter before you do a race. And then in the spring, hopefully you've selected your crew, you've gone to some seminars, some safety at sea, jumped in the pool with your life jacket on, made sure all those new sails fit, gotten the kinks worked out of your new rigging. This is not the time to install brand new instrumentation because you'll never get it calibrated and working in time. That should have been done over the winter. So then in the early spring, April, an overnight is in order. Down the bay is great. Getting your crew together, forming a team. Who's good at what? Did I pick the right people? Do they still really want to go? Do you still really want them on the boat?
So Dave, are there any differences that when you're preparing, like your process of walking through?
Well, I think everything that Lynn said applies to anybody going offshore. For me personally, I've been very involved in campaigns that were crewed boats, anywhere from double-handed to a crew of 8 or 10. But for myself, I was preparing to do a single-handed race and then a double-handed race back. So I had a little easier in that I knew who was going with me. Actually, 2 of the 3 races, my wife was my partner, so that was resolved. But I can't emphasize how important it is to start planning well ahead of time. I planned easily a year in advance when I did the 1-2 the first time, and I'm already planning for racing next year. I started a month ago. You know, you can't plan too far in advance. You have to do exactly what she said. Look what the requirements are. What do you need? How are you going to budget everything? And there's always going to be more to do. I have a whiteboard that I'm constantly adding stuff to. Oh, I forgot about that. Let's write that down. It's one more thing. You know, the old joke about, you know, you have putting 2 things on your list for every one you mark off. That's the thing. So.
And how about you, Jayne?
So I'm just going to reiterate the differences between a delivery. So for a race, we've got all of that, but the one thing you can't adjust is when you leave. If you want to be in the race, you're leaving on that time. And the difference with the delivery is I've often got days. I've never seen the boat before. I'm turning up. I'm calling friends and asking if they're available to come and do a trip down the bay. But the difference there is that I've got the ability to be able to direct whether I've got a weather window and whether or not I'm going to stop, or those kinds of things. And so I think that's the ultimate, the biggest difference.
Yeah. All right, Jayne, next question. We'll start with you. What do you look for in an offshore crew member? Are there any red flags you look for? Do you do like drug testing, or like talk to us about your crew?
Great question. Talking about racing.
Or deliveries, either.
Well, yeah, and
Okay.
the same goes. With racing, you need people who want to race, and actually that's a really big deal. So when you're racing,
So you wouldn't want me. I don't want to race. Go ahead.
We'll go for a nice cruise. It'd be great, Cheryl. We very quickly found out that there are plenty of people that we go with who are not even that interested in pushing themselves for longer than a day race. When you're racing to Bermuda or further, you are pushing yourself. And so for me, I'm looking for someone who's actually competitive, somebody who's really wanting to be part of this race, who's excited, not just like, yeah, I'll do it. You don't want a yeah, I'll do it kind of person. You do, though, not necessarily want everyone to be the same. God forbid 6 people on a boat the same as me. So I look for what I call my happy person. They don't have to be the most skilled. They don't have to be the most capable and the most experienced, but I want someone that when the weather gets bad, they go, oh, that looks bad, how can I help you? Or when you discover that your water tank has sprung a leak and you're now going to have to ration water, goes, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll write us up a schedule and I'll stick it up. Or when you come down and your gear is wet, says, oh, it looks a bit wet. Should I put my pants on? Yes, absolutely. They just need to be that way. On our trip to Bermuda, we had that one guy. The hilarious part was he had one speed. It took me 2 days to figure out that the speed was happy. And all I could hear, he was not on my watch. So we do a watch system, 3 people down, 3 people up. He was off watch. And all I could hear was, yeah, oh, okay. Took me a long time to realize that was good. I thought stuff was breaking, but no, he kept that to the last. We crossed the line in Bermuda at 2 o'clock in the morning in 25 knots of wind and raining, just what you want to finish as you're tacking towards it. He was as excited to finish as he was to start. So I'm looking for a team of people that are committed, competitive, and that mesh together, and I want a happy person thrown in there.
How about you, Dave?
I would agree with that. I've been really fortunate that almost every offshore race I've done has been with people I knew. I knew everybody on the boat. The one time I didn't, wasn't an issue, but I did have a situation 20-some years ago. I went to Chicago to do a MAC race, and I only knew a couple people in the boat, and one of the guys on the other watch, there was some conflict with some of the other people on the boat, and it made for a very uncomfortable situation. Fortunately, I was somewhat removed from that, but yeah, it's not good if you have people that don't get along. Again, like I say, I've been fortunate to race with people that I knew. We all knew each other. We all got along. Everybody had strengths that they brought to the boat. One race in particular that I can remember, it turned out me was the MacGyver person. It was me that was always fixing something, and it was me that was always getting up when I was off watch, which was fine. I would not have wanted them to go, oh, no, don't wake Dave. Yeah, wake me up. And like you say, you want people who are competitive, who want to be involved. And if you have people like that on board, it makes it a whole lot more enjoyable for everybody. You do want to make sure that nobody has a health issue or, God forbid, some kind of an addiction or problem. You don't want somebody that's going to get out there and become a liability for the boat, because that increases the danger for everybody. And fortunately, again, since we usually say with people we know ahead of time whether that could be an issue.
So Lynn, I was going to ask you about the, you mentioned the local race that you do as like your sort of shakedown cruise. Yeah, can you talk to us about that and training your crew?
Local race is the best way to do it, I think. Down the Bay is a perfect race. We haven't always had the opportunity to do that, but local race is great. This past race, though, I didn't have the opportunity to do a local race because our crew was coming from all over the nation and Canada. So we only met to do the race when we got to Newport, and one lady I didn't even know. I had never met before, but we held a series of Zoom meetings to talk about, each other's strengths and weaknesses and how we could back each other up. And then rather than asking questions about, can you sail a compass course at night? How do you feel on the bow? I asked kind of a series of probing questions where each person had to tell a story, like, what are you afraid of? And how can we mitigate that fear? What's your favorite watch and why? So we not only found out if they would be good crew members, but if we would mesh together and could actually come together as a team, even though we were geographically apart.
So I know some of our captains here in the room and online are also delivery captains, and sometimes they're meeting owners of boats. They're sometimes with people they don't know. Do any of you, I'll just throw this to anybody who wants to take it, have a story about, you mentioned addictions, Dave, like a drug. Okay, Jayne's got one. All right, here we go.
So there we were. I think even when you know people, even when you've been around them, you've raced or you've sailed for a few hours, it's not the same as 5 days constantly in a small boat on starboard tack for 5 days too. So I've been in a situation with a medical issue where we had a very capable skipper and a very seasick crew, very seasick. So seasick that we had to sort of come back to basics. I was literally giving her a sip, a tiny teaspoon of water every 15 minutes. We were cognitive checking her. We were, really worried. And we realized that although we'd asked people what their medical things were, we had not specifically asked for a full outline of their medical history and a full outline of anything they might have been taking. And So we didn't know if, because she'd been sick for so long, whether or not a drug she might have been taking or the lack of the drug she might have been taking might be impacting her. She then said, when she was feeling lucid, I'm taking blah, 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 and I say blah, 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 because I, unlike you, Janet, am not a doctor or a nurse. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't have any capability to be able to look up and see what it was. Now, she was okay, and she still sails with us, and it's all good, but that was interesting. In terms of addictions, I've had 2 instances, one with a crew member prepping for a race, where it became pretty evident that he was not able to control himself, and that he went from 0 to 200. We, as a team, spoke to him, prepared him, and basically said, you know, you need to commit to us that you won't drink before the race, or you can't come. And if you can't come, we've now prepared ourselves for a race that we can't go to. I've done a delivery too with a person that I needed to control. And although I've got a big bark, there's not a lot of me in the middle of the ocean. And so it's something you really seriously need to prepare for. I will not let anybody use scopolamine patches on a boat that I am the skipper on anymore, unless they have used a scopolamine patch and can tell me that they do not have an adverse reaction. That is a very dangerous position to be in, and there have been races with people throwing things off the boat, and we've all heard about it before, but you really need to have no HIPAA law exists when you're getting on a boat, and you need to have those hard conversations.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Dave, I'm going to throw this next one to you first. Preparing the boat, like what are you looking for when you're doing a pre-voyage check? And I know that you're also a delivery captain, not just a racer. So you can talk about this however you want. Yeah.
Well, there is a difference, yes. I do deliver boats, not frequently, but enough. Some of you may have seen pictures I've put up online of the delivery we did last January, where we came in with 8-inch icicles hanging off the boat. But yeah, prepping for a delivery, you don't know what you're going to get when you get there. Something might be broken, something might be missing. The owner might have said, oh yeah, it's in great shape, wink, wink. Prepping for a race, for myself, on my boat, I've done a lot of work on the boat myself. I know the boat intimately. The boats that I've raced on, I've known fairly intimately. So being very familiar with the boat is critical. You know where everything is, you know how things work, you know how things are put together, and if you have to take it apart, you may even already know what tools you need and how to do it. Going through and just doing checks, probably the old adage about, you know, the worst thing that you can do for a boat is not use it. If you use a boat regularly, you're going to be always noticing if something's out of place or something's not working right. So being familiar with the boat and knowing right away if something's not right is critical. As far as the rigging, the electrical work, again, you're always checking it, you're going over it and using it. You see here on the list, we were talking about this when we were prepping for this, as far as spares, you know, some people say, well, I got a spare of everything, you know. Well, do you have a spare alternator, a spare starter? Maybe, maybe not, depends where you're going. If you're going to Bermuda, I don't know what to tell you. Bermuda's interesting in that Newport Bermuda race is the big offshore race, as is the Annapolis Bermuda race on the East Coast. But you're going to be there in 5 days. So maybe you can get by with jury rigging things, maybe not. Then you got to worry about, okay, I got crew. Does everybody have any issues I need to worry about? Jane was talking about medical issues. Well, hopefully that won't be an issue, but people do get injured on boats. I recently was injured myself this past spring doing a 20-day passage. Tore up my hand pretty badly. It's still not completely healed. So what do you have in the way of addressing medical issues on the boat? And how much do you want to carry in the way of drugs? If you're going on long passages across an ocean, you're probably going to have a pretty extensive med kit and drug kit. If you're going to Bermuda, you're still going to need a medical kit, but you might not need as much in the way of drugs. Talk to a doctor, see what they recommend carrying.
So Jane,
else?
yeah, so Jane, I had a question for you about engine repair underway, because we mentioned that, Dave mentioned we did have a little prep session.
So Dave said he wasn't sure what you should take from the Annapolis to Bermuda. I will tell you, you take 3 Volvo Penta fuel injectors. Let me tell you what happens if you arrive without those fuel injectors. So on said trip on J99, 4.5 days on starboard tack. On the J99, the fuel tank vent is on the port side, below the gunnel, below the tow rail. And we think probably after 3 days, that vent fitting stops being one way and becomes delightfully 2 ways, and you arrive with a full tank of diesel mixed with seawater. So when you finish your race, you turn engine on and chaos ensues. You're fine, you're over there. It's very expensive if you then have to, as we did, sail through the St. George's Cut down to the cruise ship dock, find somebody to fix it for you. They don't have the parts. We flew back to the United States, got the parts, the last 3 fuel injectors for that side of a Volvo Penta, and then the owner flew back and fitted them. Would you really travel with 3 fuel injectors? Probably not, but you can see it. I think the other thing I have done is to bleed an engine because we ran out of fuel in the Sargasso Sea. And the trick there is, it's not difficult. We've probably all done it. I hadn't done it on, or a few people hadn't done it on that engine. So making sure your crew has checked out that engine and that boat. We did a delivery on a boat that we, for the life of us, couldn't find the through hull, and then discovered after 2 hours that it was a dry, it was a dry engine, for goodness sakes. So know the engine, know the thing that you're working at, and if you ever have to bleed a Yanmar 3GM, it's really hot and it'll take way more little pushes of your finger than you expect, but it will happen.
All right, I'm going to change this up a little bit. Oh,
No,
real quick?
I do want to add, the one thing you definitely want to check without fail is your steering. Every year there's some boat that has a steering issue, loses their rudder, or as is the case in the Bermuda race this year, I know 2 boats had steering issues and did make it to Bermuda, but it cost them the race. And one of them, I think they were only 70 miles out, and the steering cable broke, and they had to use their emergency steering, so that cost them their race. They did get to Bermuda safely, but there goes all that prep work and hard work. Another boat had a little bit more serious steering issue. They did make it in, and then there was the boat that sank after their rudder was ripped open out of the bottom of the hull. That was not a prep issue. That's something that was totally unavoidable, but definitely you want to check your steering issues very carefully.
All right, thank you. Lynn, no, you're the next one. I'm skipping. How is navigation handled? Like, do you have a designated navigator? Can you talk about how you plan navigation and the leadership assigned if you're not up in that cockpit?
Sure. I've actually had races where I've been the skipper, navigator, watch captain all in one. And I've also done a race where I had a dedicated nav person that, sat down there and stared at the computer the whole way. In Annapolis, Bermuda, I thought it was good that we had 2 navigators, me and my other watch captain. Also did navigation because the bay is just a different animal from being out on the ocean. There's the current makes a big difference getting down the bay in a timely fashion, and of course wind shift all over the place from day to night. So you have to stay on top of those type of things. So I've also used the model where we had the girl with the computer staring at it full time, and I thought it was good and bad because I think we had not outlined rules of engagement as far as communication and decision making. So while I was asleep, there were just some decisions made that I didn't care for, and I let the crew know about it in no uncertain terms. Stop laughing, Katie. Julianne, I see you. So both ways work. But you have to have a working relationship with the person who's navigating while you're not on watch, as well as your watch captain, and how those 3 leadership roles all work or don't work together. You have to have that in place before you cast off the lines.
Anything else to add from either of you?
Yeah, something you touched on about making a decision when you were off watch. There really needs to be a structure of command. Who's going to be in charge when the person in charge isn't in charge? For your boat, I mean, you had, what, 8 people on the boat going? 6, okay. I've been fortunate, you know, when I'm single-handing, yeah, I'm the only one in charge, but when I'm double-handing, I have to be certain that my double-handed partner knows what our plan is. You know, this is how we're going to do it. And if you think we need to deviate from that, he needs to let me know. I've been on boats where, you know, you have a watch, 4 people on, 4 people off, and someone on the opposite watch decides to do something a little different, and that's not what was agreed upon. So there needs to be consistency in the decision-making process. For navigation and all, it varies. You know, this past Newport Bermuda race, I mean, it was pretty obvious how we needed to go, navigating the Gulf Stream. But again, you have to look at all the resources. You have to sit down and discuss that with your crew, how you're going to attack it, where you want to enter the Gulf Stream, and what do you want to do when you come out of the Gulf Stream. And that cost some people the race. It cost the boat I was on a first place, even though we ended up doing well. And I don't know, how did you do, Jane, going to Bermuda from Annapolis?
We came 3rd, but
Right.
we sucked coming down the bay. We missed the time.
Neither, Mike. Let me go ahead and ask, I'm going to skip ahead because we're going to open it up after this one question to the attendees. Ensuring safety when underway, Jane. Can you talk about crew health and that proper hydration? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about it before, but it would be helpful.
So on my boat going to Bermuda, I am the only woman, and they kindly call me boat mum. But I am, so I know for a day race, you can suck it up and we can wait, and if someone's dehydrated at the end of the day, we hydrate them. We cannot as a team make it through if we can make it through if one person goes down. If 2 people go down, we're suffering, and if 3 people go down, we're really suffering. And so looking after each other is important, just for being nice, but it's also important because you're a team and you need each other. So there were some discussions we needed to have. Yeah, I mean, people don't usually hydrate enough. When we talked about how much we had to hydrate, we had to do that. That wasn't the problem, though, on our race. Our race, definitely, it was about nutrition. Teaching people the fact that you have to feed your body. You have to keep your body going.
Yeah.
Can I have a real conversation here, too? That means also going to the bathroom. Get your system working. It's got to work. If you haven't pooped for 4 days, and I tell you to tack and take a heading, your brain is literally going to be thinking about that rather than the heading. And so we all need you to be able to be making decisions. We do a check of the crew coming up and back, and after a little while it sort of stops, the conversation stops, but we sort of make people go back and go and do that. We had an instance, we'll probably talk about in weather, but it affected mental health. We had a storm line going across to Bermuda. Chris Parker had told us we were going to get winds of between 25 and 30 knots, and so we were ready. We had a reefed main and we'd taken the jib in, but the wind went from 12 knots to 56 knots in a matter of 11 seconds, and it lasted for 90 minutes. And I had the youngest member of crew on the helm. We have 3 of us on watch. He was on the helm. Do you remember the back of that boat? Do you remember it doesn't have a transom? It's an open transom. So I'm sitting in the cockpit on the main. He's behind the wheel, and I know, because I've checked the rudder and the rudder gear, that there's a little sliver of a rudder, and he's telling me, we're being rounded up, we're being rounded up, I've got no control. And I said, I know. And he said, what do I do? And I said, nothing. Let go. Let go. So for 90 minutes, long, complicated, we couldn't get the main down. We've got swept back spreaders and a doubled up, a 2-to-1 system on the main halyard. So we had a very difficult time getting the main sail down. While we were doing that, we were basically on our ear in the middle of the ocean, completely adrift. So much wind and so much rain that it flattened the water out. It looked like corduroy, the sort of the texture of corduroy as you go through. And most challenging sailing I've ever done. But I've done, not like that. I've done things with my dad where I knew that we'd be okay. This guy didn't know that he was going to be okay. I knew he was going to be okay. And he won't mind telling you, he lost it. We had another crew member who lost it by going inside himself. So his way of coping was to sit there. My guy on the helm lost it. And so I had to tell him to go and to sit on the floor. To wait. We had to call up the other crew member, the owner and I had to pull the main down, and then we had to wait it out. Now afterwards, my crew member on the helm felt terrible. He felt guilty, he felt ashamed, he felt shocked. There were a lot of feelings. And these things are okay. Had I mentioned that we'd been in the ocean for 4 days and we were tired and hungry because that stove wasn't working and we were really short on water and we'd all been on 3-hour watches? These things happen. When you're delivering a boat, you heave to and you figure it out. We sat there, but we're still racing. So there's this balance between it, but we had to go and deal with his feelings. So we had to make sure he was okay. I had to, we had to have some real conversations, and we still had to have some real conversations later, but you have to do that. You have to check everyone's okay. Everyone was okay, and the boat was okay.
Thank you for that story. I'm gonna move us to the questions from start with the online questions.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect one for Jayne. Question coming in from Captain Duncan Hood. How do you keep up positivity in the face of that?
So the question is, did everyone hear that? How do you keep up positivity within your crew?
Hi, Duncan Hood. Good to hear from you. So I do a lot of talking beforehand, and I do a lot of checking, and we do a fair bit of kind of silliness. I got this not from Lynn's boat, but one of her watch captain, Russ, and Katie and I sang pretty much every watch, right? Back from Bermuda, poor Katie. But you've got to figure out something that's going on, and you've got to find also something that you have kids. We've done road trips. think of this like kids and road trips. You have something for halfway there, something for 3 days in, something for whatever. Chocolate, wonderful, except it melts. What are those? Twizzlers. I hate them, but everybody else loves them. And so find something that is going to make people smile.
Lynn, do you have anything to add to that, since your daughter was involved with the nodding over there?
There were a lot of dad jokes. Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, anything to add?
Same thing. When I've been boats with a crew, yeah, you got to have just kind of a smart ass attitude and tell a lot of bad jokes, especially if you make fun of somebody else. You got to keep some levity in things.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. I'm going to move it to questions within the room. So if anyone has a question, would you come up to the microphone? Anybody have a question? Raise your hand first. Otherwise, I have questions I haven't asked yet, but go ahead. Okay. Yeah. Just stand at the microphone, because that way everyone online can hear as well.
Yes, since you have a lot of experience with women on boats, just as far as the men who are captains, what would be your recommendation for their, with dealing, managing with their wives? What's your best advice that you would give us men, I guess?
What do we think the problem is?
Keeping them smiling.
Got it.
Good one, Jane. No, I have crewed on mixed boats most of my life. My foray into female only was just been this past summer. But I would say treat them as human beings. That's what they want to be received as. Treat them as if you were treating another human being with respect. They may not have the skill that you do, but they're there, so they must want to learn, to spend time with you, to not be belittled or berated. Treat them as a human being, help them on their journey. Somebody helped you, help them, get them a leg up, and they'll probably be great crew members. Yeah, they might even be better. But one thing I've noticed, the difference between sailing with women and sailing with men, is that women tend to trust their intuition more. If they smell something wrong, if they sense a wind shift, if some piece of gear is making a funny noise, we're going to notice first. And the man's going to deny it because he's the one that installed it initially without the manual. We're going to notice it first, and we're going to say something. So the next step in promoting women's sailing is, now we notice it. Now, can we fix it? Can we be responsible for that equipment? So, treat them as human, help them on their journey.
I don't have that problem because my crew always listens to me. She also cooks me dinner every night.
I was actually asking you a valid question before. I think the answer quite often when I'm working with couples on boats, it is the majority of couples that have bought boats, yes, is men who have had more experience and have had more experience in getting on vehicles and just going. The women who I've worked with tend to have had less experience. But it's not always the case. And so, in fact, if you neutralize that comment, it's about couples and understanding the difference in your experience. And so that if you're a man and you had more experience, understanding that your spouse may have had less experience only. And as you said, I would actually, not because I'm a coach, I would also advocate for having your less experienced spouse, whether that's a man or a woman, go and get their experience maybe without you. Mm-hmm. And that gives people confidence and their own skill and language to be able to go off and go and deal with that. So one thing I've noticed too is sometimes when you do go sailing together or out in a boat together, switch your roles. I tend to find women dock boats better. I think because they don't expect to just be able to muscle it in. And so I can usually teach a woman from 0 to great in how to dock a boat because they just do it as they've done it. Well, with a man, I'm often having to unteach, to unlearn a few of those skills to say, this is not a car, it's not a four-wheeler, it's a boat, slow down, and that slow down is quite different. So if we neutralize the language, you've got one person who's more experienced and one person who's less, find your skills, and then find a way of being trained and working together, and you'll have a great time.
Thank you. I have another question from online. Real
I'll
fast.
just follow up
Okay.
with what you were saying. I too have found when I do a lot of personalized teaching, and with couples, I also have found teach the woman how to dock the boat, drive the boat. One, because it gets her very involved, and two, the man generally is the stronger and has the longer arms and the bigger reach, so he can muscle things if needs to be muscled. You know, he's up on the bow and he can actually brute force the boat around if need be, and that's something that's probably not going to happen if she's up there. So yeah, definitely try to spread the wealth, I guess, you know, get them fully involved so they're, you know, on board and really want to do this. If they feel like they're just along for the ride because this is what hubby wants to do, it's not going to end very well.
Okay, Dave, from the online, is it the one you texted me? Okay, the importance of meals as it relates to crew attitude. And one of the questions I skipped over because of time was about provisioning. So can you talk about crews? Yes.
Yeah, actually, I'll address this exactly because I went through this past year. I may have mentioned I did Newport, Bermuda this year, double-handed with a very good friend of mine who I've sailed with several times, both with him and against him. He had done Annapolis, Bermuda before, and their meals were freeze-dried food. And I said, that's not going to fly. So I went to the trouble of actually cooking and freezing several meals. We ate some of them on the way up, and he said, yeah, this is pretty good. We had a residence inn room in Newport, so when his wife drove up with all the frozen food, we could keep it frozen until the race. And that's what we ate most of the way to Bermuda. As rough as it was, we were eating pretty well all the way to Bermuda. And it makes a huge difference when you have good food and warm food in your belly that sticks to you, as opposed to having to boil water and put it in a pouch and sit and wait for it to do its thing. And hopefully you didn't screw up the water measurement, because if it's too much water, it's all runny and gross, and it's not enough water, it doesn't taste good. And then having at least a little bit of fresh food and maybe some chocolate on board and maybe a little bit of fruit, it makes a world of difference in your attitude. And I got to say, we got to Bermuda and we were in pretty good spirits.
Oh, nice. All right. Anybody else on the provisioning?
Oh, well, I disagree with Dave. You've heard the expression, an army travels on its stomach. Also true for offshore sailing, but you kind of do need to temper your menus a little bit. You know, sometimes you like spicy food on shore. Spicy food does not like you offshore. So, you know, just plan ahead to have some good, solid nutrition. Hot is always helps attitude.
Right. All right, Hans, I think you had a question, didn't you? All right, thank you for coming to the mic. And anybody else in the room after Hans? Okay, a couple people, all right?
You've all shared very challenging, even dangerous situations that you've encountered. I've heard only Dave say that he single-handed from the coast to Bermuda as a single-handed racer. How did you prepare, quote unquote, for some of these situations? How did you handle watch standing, checking the weather, and also navigation?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Preparing for it, basically I made sure I knew the boat. I had bought the boat with the idea of doing the single-handed race. So I had it basically 4 years to prep, with 3 full seasons where I was sailing the boat a lot, mostly with crew, but I would go out by myself a lot. So I was very familiar with the boat, how it worked, how it handled. And I like to say, the boat was like a glove to me. I knew if I lost my balance, I knew just where to grab, where to reach for something. I was very comfortable on the boat. As far as working through iterations of things, like I knew how to reef quickly. I knew just what I needed to do. It was just second nature to me. Watch standing, now, okay, single-handed. You're going to sleep. I'm not going to stay awake for 96 hours it took me to get to Bermuda the first time, and the 100 and some odd the second and third time. Leaving Bermuda or leaving Newport, I tried to just rest in the cockpit and rest my eyes, being awake, but just resting. And then as I got further from shore, once I got about 50 miles from shore, I felt a little more comfortable that I wasn't going to deal with fishing boats. Having AIS receive the first time and then AIS both ways after that, I wasn't worried about freighters. Other competitors, I know in one race, some of the guys I know from doing that race, 2 of them bumped in the middle of the night one night, and they both jumped up out of their sleep and yelled at each other, "You hit me!" And they were both pointing fingers at each other. So yeah, as I got further from shore, I was catnapping. I would set my alarm for 30 minutes, and fortunately I was pretty good at falling asleep and getting at least 15 or 20 minutes of sleep, and I'd wake up and then either look around. Sometimes I slept in the cockpit. Sometimes if it was really a fairly steady wind, fairly calm seas, I'd sleep below. There were many times I just slept in my fallies on top of sailbags on the cockpits, on the cabin sole. Both times, actually all 3 times I did the race, there were times I did fall asleep for an hour and a half to 2 hours. But generally, it was an enforced thing of forcing myself to at least rest my eyes, at least try to fall asleep for a short period of time. And even though my wife will tell you the first time I was pretty much exhausted when I did get to our apartment, and I slept for 10 hours straight, but I did get to Bermuda and felt awake and, energized. So you do have to kind of train yourself.
Thanks, Dave. I know we had a question back here, if you come up and use the mic, and then right after that, Tony, if you would come up, and then we'll wrap it up. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. It's awesome. You mentioned Chris Parker. What weather apps and services do you most rely on and really trust?
And that was one of the other questions we didn't get to, so thank you very much. Awesome.
Yeah, I'll kick off and tell you what I've used, but actually, Lynn, you're really good at it. I've used Chris Parker. For racing, the difficulty is this. My race was, if you'd raced against us, would have been very different from yours. We all start at different times, and so by the time you're 2 days out, I could be 100 nautical miles ahead of another competitor or vice versa. And so these plans for you came out. We had Starlink on board. No, we had Starlink on board. It's amazing. Twice a day, we'd turn the engine on and put the Starlink on, and I'm using Predict Wind. It's incredible. So it's 2024, and these things look really different from the way they did when I was a kid. Lynn's got a good weather story from her trip back, though.
Getting weather information offshore is crucial, and that's kind of outlined in the rules that you need to have a way to get weather information. That being said, a lot of boats do it differently. I used an Iridium Go exec unit for my last trip, but walking the docks in Bermuda, there was all these things that look like pizza boxes on almost every boat. That's the Starlink antenna. It's really become affordable and easy to use. You do have to manage power a little bit and web surfing a little bit, but that seems to be fantastic. And when we're racing, we're not really allowed to receive any information that another competitor cannot get. So using a service like Commanders, or Jayne mentioned Chris Parker, is strictly verboten. We can access websites that everybody has access to, like Windy. I use Windy. We had some Gulfstream data that was available through NOAA to the whole public that we used. And before we left, we had a private Gulfstream consultant that turned off, when we started the race. So I would say we're getting weather updates, probably once a watch or every other watch. So every 8 hours, we would get a weather update and adjust our course based on that. That being said, on the way back, my navigator was not with me, and my Iridium Go exec kicked the bucket. Could not get any weather information. But even when your satellite comms go down, there's other ways to get information. I saw a cruise ship passing me and called him on the VHF and said, "Hey, can you give me a forecast? I'm headed towards Annapolis." And he said, "Well, we're going to have 2 more days of this squally weather," which was, it, like Jayne said, it could go from 0 to 50 in a heartbeat, and sometimes quite surprising at night. So I was very disappointed to hear that we were in for 2 more days of bad weather, which would have been the entirety of the trip, basically. But then I figured out that he was heading towards Bermuda, and he's expecting 2 days of squally weather. When we figured out our communication error, he relayed to me that maybe we had 8 more hours of bad weather. There was no tropical formation or anything, and we would be in good shape in 8 hours.
Nice story. All right. Tony, last question. Yes, and then I have a wrap-up question for them, but this is it. Yes.
I have a question about doing deliveries. I chose not to do deliveries. I'm an instructor because I've heard stories about doing deliveries having the owner aboard. You're the captain. They've hired you, and yet they're the owner, and they think they can tell you what to do. So I've heard some really bad stories. Can you tell me some of yours?
I charge extra now when the owner comes on board because I'm coaching at the same time as delivering, and it works really well. Owners are hard where you don't know what their experience is. Dave and I are actually linked by a delivery. The icicle boat I later delivered with this crew over there, and I actually I did the delivery without the owner and his wife. I think the question becomes, do you want the boat delivered quickly? Or do you want to learn how to sail? And do those 2 things have to happen in the same trip? When we delivered the Beneteau 49, we had an owner that was going to come with us. Became very evident that he'd bought the boat because he'd had a recurrence of cancer. And I was taking the boat from Annapolis, and because of its mast height, I had to go around Hatteras to Hilton Head. I said, no, I would not take him around Cape Hatteras, thank you, but that we would pick him up in Myrtle Beach. And when we got down to North Carolina, a system came down the coast from the Labrador. It was really intense. Never seen anything on the sky like that. And we called and I canceled. I said, I'm not coming to pick you up again. I can come, it will slow us down, but no, I'm not putting you on the boat at the same time. So that's the question I always have is, what is of primary concern for you? To learn how to sail the boat or to get the boat delivered? And do those 2 things have to happen at the same time now?
I too have had the situation with the owner on board. One that comes to mind, my wife and I did a delivery from Jersey City down. We're going to supposedly go to Charleston, and that's a whole other story. The owner was going to be on board. I told him flat out, you're welcome to be on board, but there will be me and a mate, being my wife as the mate, solely for the reason that I don't know what this owner is capable of. I don't know whether he can stand watch. I don't know if he knows what he's looking at when he sees lights on the sea at night. I don't know if he's going to get sick. As it turned out, it was rather hot coming down. We motored a lot. In fact, I think we may have motored almost the whole way down the coast and up the Delaware and down the bay. And it was pretty evident that it was wearing him out. We ended up stopping at the lower part of the bay, and I said, instead of dropping my wife off and you and I continue on down the ICW, because I felt comfortable doing that, I said, why don't we just take a break and you go back to North Carolina, and when this weather breaks in a week, come back and we'll finish the trip. And he agreed, and he later told me that was the best thing he could have done, because he was wiped out. And it just would not have been, it was not a good situation. So you have to be able to say, hey, you can come along, but these are the circumstances. You're not going to put yourself at risk because the owner has the attitude that he's all gung-ho, I want to do this trip. I had one owner wanted to go around Hatteras. I said, no, it's December, it's a new boat, it's been on the hard for a year, and your first trip out on the boat, we're not going around Hatteras.
Yeah.
So you have to lay down the law and take charge.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, anything else? Lynn? Okay, I'm going to ask the roundup questions. So it's the one, if you could offer just one or two must-dos to the captain's beginning an extended passage, what would they be? And I'll start with you, Lynn. So again, one or two must-dos that captains beginning an extended passage, what should they do?
Okay, just for the record, this was not in our prep package, Cheryl. Okay, just for the record, somebody did not do their homework. So my number one must-do is ask a lot of questions. Ask questions till you're blue in the face. Ask questions until everybody's comfortable. And my number two must-do is communicate. Lay down some ground rules. Like Dave said, if you're with an owner, lay down some ground rules and expectations. So everybody can be Jayne's happy person on the boat.
I'd say the one thing you have to do is pre-plan. Lynn mentioned earlier, read the NOR if it's a race, know what you have to have on the boat, know what you must comply with to do the race, and plan way far in advance than what you think you need to plan.
Okay, so you've done all of those things. I think we've mentioned it before, to get a sense of it. If you've only been a day sailor or a day boater, go and do an overnight trip on the bay. Go and do something that pushes your boundaries, but in a comfortable area that you know really well. And then you guys make it sound so glum. Go and have fun. Can I tell you what it feels like to come out of the bay? And we saw 100, I kid you not, 100 dolphins and 2 pilot whales. When you're coming into Bermuda and you're tired, it's amazing how a turtle makes you feel. I know, Katie, you should have been sailing with me. Go and enjoy it. Take a picture of it, feel what it feels like, take some video because you'll forget. You're tired, go and enjoy it. And so are we.
It was an extended passage question. Yes, but good. All right, can we give a great big hand to our... And on behalf of CAPCA, we would like to give you this little thoughtful gift just for your preparation and for all of your time. And thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. But I hope you agree that this has just been a really amazing session. And to have all three of them, you can tell they all know each other and they get along well. but I think the stories have just been really helpful to all of us. So thank you so much. And at this time, we're going to draw the door prize.
Before you draw the door prize, let me just say to everybody, on your table is one of these cards. Take this card with you and give it to a friend who's not a Council member. Let them understand who we are and encourage them to join our association.
And I want to also thank all of you who are online, as well as the people in the room for coming. So those of you in the room, you get to draw. Who hasn't? Oh, we didn't have. Dudley, can I have you over here? You get, because yeah, we didn't. You and I did not take a door prize, so it would be perfect for us to draw one of those. Okay. All right. This is my husband, Dudley.
Hello.
All right. So for the Suicide Run to Archangel book.
Ticket number 23726-020. 23726.
Yes? All right, Katie. There you go. You're welcome. And one more.
And number 2.
For the medical kit that could be very useful in a dinghy or something else.
Here we go. 23726-022.
All right. Woo! All right. So with that, thank you very much. If you can go to the next slide, just to remind everybody when our next program is next month on October 28th, and the other events that are coming up. Is it not in there? Okay, it's all right. They have it on their tables. All right. Oh, wait, Tony's got one more. There it is. Tony, you have to get to a microphone. Thank you.
At our next meeting, we're going to be nominating people to replace Board of Director members who are exiting because of their time is up. So please be thinking about who might be interested in getting on the board, and you can nominate them with their permission, and of course you can nominate yourself. So think that over for the next month before our next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony, and thank you all. Appreciate it.